All right, so welcome, Carla. That is a wrap. Just a little feedback from what we went over last week. If you were not here, the recording is somewhere. I'm going to make sure that I have the link ready for you. I don't know exactly what happened to the link last week, but I found it this week. So I'm going to make sure that I'll share it in the private WhatsApp group. I want to welcome you if you are watching this on a replay. Welcome to your UVision. Welcome to my class. This is where we go over how we can really use our mind so that it works for us and not against us, right? A lot of the times, something that I was going to say earlier is that what I am fascinated about learning about the brain, the structure of the mind thinking, right? I love both parts of the whole brain spectrum, which is the mindset part of it and which is the brain. And if you remember last week, I mentioned that the brain and the mind is two completely different things. I know that sometimes, or before, at least for me, when people used to say something about the mind, the first picture I would get was the brain. But the way that I love to put it is that if you look at a building, right, in your close neighborhood, perhaps is a store, perhaps it's like a massive building. I'm going to put in here an AT&T building, right? Because AT&T, I think, is pretty popular all around the world. And so if you have an AT&T building, what is the building? The building is just the edifice, right? The bricks, the cement, the furniture, and whatnot. The mind will be the people working the business, right? Is what is making the business be fruitful. So that's pretty much what the brain and the mind is. The brain is the edifice, is the structure of what, or like the houses that keeps the mindset, the network, the energy, the thoughts, the feelings, things that are not tangible. It's what keeps it going. Now, give me 1 second. I do want to mention that I am fighting a cold, so I will be pausing quite a few times just so I can take a break to either drink water or to cough. So I apologize for that in advance. And let's get started with our slides. I'm super excited about what I'm about to teach. Again, like I mentioned, I am so passionate about sharing anything and everything about the brain. So give me a sec. All right. Are you able to see my slides, Carla?
Perfect.
All right.
Little...
So let's get started with our brain. Our brain is this beautiful structure that you see right here, right? It's like...
Carmen, can you do it? Pardon me. Can you do it full screen? Are you able to do the slide full screen?
Oh, yes, right. I was sharing the wrong one. Give me a sec right here. Is that better?
It looks beautiful. Thank you.
Did it cover the whole screen?
Yes, it's gorgeous. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. So thank you for that. So our brain is pretty much this mass of goodness, right? That it weighs about 3 pounds inside our skull, and it takes about 20 to 25% of all of our energy. So all of that wonderful glucose, those carbs that you are trying to avoid every day and why you crave them so much, right, is because the brain feeds off that glucose. It needs that to survive. It needs that to do its proper functions. It needs that to feed itself so that it can continue working and therefore continue to nurture your whole body, right? To allow your body to do what it's supposed to do, right? To keep you alive. And so this cell right here might be very familiar to you, which is a neuron. I touched a little bit on the neuron last week, right? But there are so many different other neurons, right? But this is the one that we mostly know, right? We got the dendrites right there. We're going to go more deeper into what exactly a neuron does, right? But this is pretty much like the messenger, right? So now when we talk about the mind and the brain, like I want you to see the brain is the mass in here, right? Like that wrinkly stuff that you see there, something tangible where you can touch. The mind is all those little network connections. It's like all that energy that is being fired from neuron to neuron to communicate. So then it allows the brain to know, hey, this is what we need to move our arm. Hey, this is what we need to breathe. This is what we need, right? And though that breathing and the primary functions of our body are done without us even thinking, they take place over here on the lower brain, we are still needing a lot of that energy for survival. So, all right, so there is a theory out there that you're probably very familiar with. The left side is what allows us to think logically, right? While the right side allows us to experiment with our creativity, right? So, however, there are some structures. Each part of the brain has a different structure. It's like a different person. It's like different departments. This is how I'm gonna put it. So this is a building, right? It has different departments that are in charge of different things. And on the left side of the brain, we happen to have those more critical thinking skills parts, right? Departments that are in charge of like math, for instance, right? Or communication, or let's say critical thinking, problem solving. And then on the right side, we have the more creative side, like the imagination. Like, let's think a little bit of what we can do if we try doing something out of routine, more outside the box, okay? All right, so here the left hemisphere, so our brain is divided into two pieces, right? The left and the right, we call those hemispheres. The left hemisphere, it's in charge for the language processing, the logical and analytical thinking, right? Also, the memory, right, goes on the left side, detail-oriented processing and all those things on the left side. And again, I'm going to just give you pinpoints that you can go home and you can do your own research. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I will definitely give you a general knowledge just so that you understand your body better, right? Why you do the things that you do, why you think, sometimes even like the way that you think. But the best yet is that how you can actually change that, right? How you can reprogram your brain to beat those odds, right? To beat that addiction, to beat those habits that you're trying to quit. Maybe by you understanding how your brain functions, it will better give you an understanding of how you can help yourself better change any habits that you are trying to break, perhaps that you haven't been able to do so. And so with the right hemisphere is what gives you the spatial and visual processing. Spatial meaning like, where is my body in space? So if I am moving to the right, what is happening to my body? Hey, like, right? So there's a signal that tells the brain, it's called the vestibular system, that goes like super, I don't want to get super crazy in it, but so the vestibular system allows you to know your body in space, right? Like, are you moving too much to the left? It allows you to get the balance. So you find that on the right side of your brain. It also has the intuition and creativity, like when you get the hunch feeling like I shouldn't do that, right? Also the emotional processing, right? The emotional processing when there is something that you're feeling, right? Is it like, for instance, like an emotion could be as positive or as negative, right? It could be something scary, it could be something very delightful. And also the non-verbal memory. So for instance, when you're riding a bike, right? In the very beginning, you start using what? Your frontal cortex. Okay, you gotta move your feet. Now you gotta hold on to the balance. Now you gotta turn the pedals, right? That happens in the frontal cortex while you're learning something, but then it goes to what happens? It goes to an area of your brain that is in charge of doing something on automatic that will allow your frontal cortex to avoid thinking so much so that it can use its space and abilities to think of something else that it's not that. Okay, I don't know if that makes any sense. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Okay. Okay, so here comes the neuron. This is my BFF, and it should be your BFF too. It's very complex. It's structure and just everything in here. But the complexity. So the human brain, we get about 86 billion neurons, okay? And glial cells are also amazing. They're also part of the network of your brain, okay? So the neurons are some cells that have dendrites. The dendrites are right here. Call this like the messengers, right? They're listening for messages that other neurons are sending to our brain. So the glial cells are pretty much like the glue cells, those go in between, and those hold neurons. So before, it was believed that one neuron would have one extra, like the ratio for a glial cell with a neuron cell, it was one neural cell, it was one glial cell for one neuron, right? But further research has shown that there's actually about four glial cells per neuron. So now the glial cells are like the glue. They maintain that connection, that activity that goes on, but the glial cells are actually like so much more beautiful if you study them, since they are the ones that pretty much, they're like the guards of the building. Okay, so the neurons are the departments communicating between each other so they can make the function of the body work as it's supposed to, where the glial cells make sure that nobody bothers the neurons so they can do their job, right? So they have a very more complex structure, but just for the purpose of this course or this class, we're just gonna stick to the neurons, okay? All right, so on our body, all over our body, we have different kinds of neurons, right? All through our nervous system, we got unipolar, pyramidal, we got multipolar, bipolar, and Purkinje, I think it's Purkinje set neurons, right? We're gonna focus only on this specific neuron, not on these, but I just thought that it was also amazing if you want to do your own research what each one of these neurons does, but every single neuron has a place within our body, okay? All right, so the structure of a neuron, how do they communicate? How are they so amazing? And how do they do it in like a nanosecond, okay? The structure of a neuron, I'm pretty sure that if you are in the self-development industry, you might have heard parts of this, okay? If not, I hope that you enjoy this. So the neuron cell is composed, or the neuron is composed of different places, right? The cell membrane, which is kind of like the body, right? Next to the soma, which is the body, but the cell membrane is pretty much what protects the neuron, right? We got the dendrites. The dendrites for me are like super fascinating because I like to explain it as the dendrites are the ladies in the building listening for information to come, right? And then they come and they tell everybody else like, hey, we need more detergent. Hey, we need to make more phone calls. Hey, we need the cleaning lady over here. So they are the ones listening for information that other neurons are firing, okay? And then so the dendrites bring all that information to the axon, right? The axon is this long tail in here in the cell. So the news come from here and they travel down this little path and they come all the way to the end of the synaptic end bulbs, and then they fire that information to other neurons that are waiting for that information to come. Now, the parts of the neuron, we got this wonderful spongy things here, if you may, but these are called the myelin sheath. Now, the myelin sheath is super amazing because this is pretty much what protects that information, that it remains the same so that it doesn't get distorted as the neuron is doing its job. For instance, let's say the dendrites hear something like, we have a spider on our arm, and then it runs all the way over here, and then it says, we have a spider on our arm, we have a spider on our arm, right? And then so other dendrites hear it, right, that information, and then what happens, it triggers us moving, or it triggers a response, right? Saying like, oh, it's just a little spider, or it triggers like a bigger response, like, oh my god, there's a spider, right? So the myelin sheath makes sure that the information the dendrites are passing on, right, is the correct information. So for instance, they say, we have a dendrite on our arm, and while it's traveling through here, they make sure that the information doesn't get from like, oh my gosh, we have a spider in our arm, to like delivering the information, oh my gosh, we have a spider on our leg, right? So they make sure that the information that dendrites receive stays and remains the same, so that when it fires that information to the other neurons, that it's exactly the same, okay? Now, I have a video here that I want to explain to you exactly what the body, what the job of the neuron does. So we're going to hear this in like 2 minutes or less. So let me see, let me make sure that I have.
Where I simplistically explain neuroscience.
Are you able to hear that, Carla?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay.
In this installment, I will discuss the neuron. This is a brain. Estimates vary, but right now the best guess seems to be that our brains contain around 85 billion neurons. The neuron is a nerve cell, and it's the primary functional unit of the nervous system. This is a generic image of a neuron. Neurons actually come in all shapes and sizes, but this is the prototypical version of a neuron that you'll often see in a textbook. The structures extending from the left side of the neuron that look a little bit like tree branches are called dendrites. Dendrites are the area where neurons receive most of their information. There are receptors on dendrites that are designed to pick up signals from other neurons that come in the form of chemicals called neurotransmitters. Those signals picked up by dendrites cause electrical changes in a neuron that are interpreted in an area called the soma, or the cell body. The soma contains the nucleus, which contains the DNA, or genetic material of the cell. The soma takes all the information from the dendrites and puts it together in an area called the axon hillock. If the signal coming from the dendrites is strong enough, then a signal is sent to the next part of the neuron, which is called the axon. At this point, the signal is called an action potential. The action potential travels down the axon, which is covered with myelin, an insulatory material that helps to prevent the signal from degrading. The last step for the action potential is the axon terminals, also known as synaptic buttons. When the signal reaches the axon terminals, it can cause the release of neurotransmitter. These purple structures represent the dendrites of another neuron. When a neurotransmitter is released from axon terminals, it interacts with receptors on the dendrites of the next neuron, and then the process repeats with the next neuron.
All right. So wasn't that amazing? So pretty much everything that I just said, right? Now let's get a little more complex. 1 second. Excuse me. So this is pretty much what we just learned, right? Where the messages are coming in through here, and it'll all make sense right now why I'm bringing this up, okay? I know this is a little too much information, but so anyways, so we got the information that is coming in from the dendrites is traveling down the axon, right? Here is the message coming in the form of, there are these little bags that have a bunch of different neurotransmitters inside. We're gonna touch on like not all the types of neurotransmitters, but the ones that we are more familiar with and what these are for. So the neurotransmitters come, and then once they get to the end of this part of it here, right? So that part is this part right here. So then those little bags are ruptured to release all those neurotransmitters. And then so those neurotransmitters, the job tells the other, it's to tell the other, they're like codes, put it this way. They're codes that tell the next cell, we need you to get scared and we need you to jump because a spider is on your arm, and we need you to move it right away because it's a black poisonous widow. And so then your body reacts differently, right? So then your neurons, based on experiences from the past that it has gathered, then they know which neurotransmitter to release in order for you to have that reaction, right? Because if you're going to get a neuron, like a neurotransmitter that it excites you, well, then you're going to do that, right? But what if you get one that relaxes you? You're not going to be like, oh, you're not going to want to caress the spider, right? So you got to know, or not you, but your brain automatically knows what kind of neurotransmitter to release in order to get the reaction that it needs for it to keep itself safe from that spider, right? Remember that the job of the brain is to always keep you safe. So all those little things that we sometimes, when we get a little spider, we're like, oh my gosh, even if it was a harmless spider, right? Why? Because our brain is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to make your species last so that you can reproduce and continue to reproduce yourself, right? That's the pretty much the brain's job, to keep you safe. So all those little reactions that we get is for that intention. So now this is how it happens. Now there are two different types of way that our neurotransmitters communicate. One of them is releasing neurotransmitters, and the other one is a synaptic electroshock. Now, I'm not going to touch on the other one only for the sake of what I'm trying to explain here, but this one, which is the synaptic energy only, like it releases only energy, and based on that energy, it has a different reaction, right? But the one that lasts the longer, and the one that we're going to discuss here, is going to be the one that releases our neurotransmitters, okay? Because it is the neurotransmitters, and it is this action that creates a behavior, okay? Okay, so now our brain, like I just mentioned, is the control center, right? Is the control center of your whole body. It's almost like in a computer. When you open the computer brain, right? You get the you get the computer, you open it, and you get all these like little circuits, right? And each circuit has its function, and then you get all these little things in here that have all the function. But the main function of this is what? Is to make sure that the energy that is receiving, it is distributed equal, well, not equally, depending on the function that you need. So if you turn on the TV, for instance, right, we know that some energy is probably going to go to this area right here because it needs more of the color, and then over here because it needs more of the sound. So it's pretty much the same thing that happens with our brain, okay? And it happens like at a massive, fast speed, right? We're talking about like less than a nanosecond. Now, a nanosecond is like, I think, 1,000th or something like that of a second. Well, our brain communicates in a much faster speed, okay? And this is pretty much the way it happens. And I love to watch this little video because it allows you see, like, what you see in here is the brain, right? It's all the neurotransmitters, all the neurons communicating with itself, but all those little sparks that you see, which you cannot see, right? You cannot feel, you cannot touch, is the energy. That is your mind. Now, the energy consumption, despite our brain weighing only about like 3 pounds, right? Which it'll be like a 2% of our body's weight. It's actually the organ that uses the most energy of in our entire body, right? Another cool thing that I have here is the plasticity of the brain, which is the neuroplasticity, going back onto the habit forming, right? Back in the days, it used to be believed that if you were born not knowing a certain skill, then that was pretty much it. That if you didn't learn it at a certain age, then you couldn't learn it later. And even now, like there are, like with some of my clients, I noticed that they say, well, I just never learned how to swim. Like we grant all this responsibility to learning everything that we have to learn when we're kids, right? Well, I never learned how to ride a bike. Like we just didn't own a bike. Well, just because you didn't know how to ride a bike back then doesn't mean that you cannot learn it now. Yeah, would it be harder? Yes, for many factors, right? It could be weight, it can be age, but more than anything is a mindset thing. Why is it a mindset thing? Because we think we can't, because we're going to fall. We are now aware of all the risks, right? We're too embarrassed to practice in front of someone. We are this, but it's really like part of the mindset, right? It's not part of the brain structure. It's part of the mindset, the way you think, the way that you feel. But is it possible to learn habits even at an older age? 100%, and it's called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity, there is a lot of research that shows that our brain is forever forming, although then the amount of cells that we were already born with, the amount of neurons, the 86 billion plus, right, neurons that we are pretty much born with, are already, like, we can't replace those. Once they're dead, but they can definitely shift, okay? So I just find that super amazing. One of the importance about sleeping in order for you to keep a healthy functioning brain is that when you're resting, your brain is doing a lot of things. Your brain is not only recharging, right? But it's also getting rid of all that information that you learned throughout the day that your body doesn't need, right? Like you cannot remember detail by detail to what happened to you yesterday. Why? Because your brain is very selective. Your brain, throughout the day, your brain is selecting, hey, this information I might need for A, B, and C. Hey, that vegetable that I ate yesterday tasted a little funky. It was rotten. Okay, let me keep that information because tomorrow I don't want to make the same mistake, and so on. So when you go to sleep and you get your enough, right, like your beautiful 8 hours, if you sleep 8 hours or however long you sleep, you get to regenerate those brain cells, right? You get to discard of all that information that your brain finds useless and gets to hold the information that your brain finds useless, and it gets to store that information in its proper. So it's kind of like the maintenance, just how a building is closed after hours, right? For cleaning, for maintenance and whatnot, is the same thing for our brain, okay? Is everything good for now so far, Carla? You understanding everything that I'm saying? Is this something that you want to pitch in, that you want to comment on, that you already knew?
I am following much.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear. Okay, so we're gonna move along. All right, so unlike other body cells that continuously regenerate, most neurons in the brain are generally not replaced throughout a person's life, which is what I just mentioned, right? However, new research suggests that neurogenesis, the birth of neurons, can occur in certain brain regions. Okay, so why is this important to know? Like I just mentioned earlier, right? Is that it says that particularly in the hippocampus is what is in charge of memory. It's important to know to do activities that continue to maintain those neurons alive, because if you don't use it, guess what? You lose it, right? So the more you practice activities to continue to keep your brain sharp, the longer you prolong those brain cells to pretty much remain fresh and live, okay? Now, we're going to touch on the neurotransmitters. In here, this is the action that is happening right here on the synaptic canal, which is, this is the end of the synapse. Okay, so if we go back to our neurotransmitter, remember our neurotransmitter had, not the neuron, I'm sorry, it had the dendrites, all the little finger spider look-alike, right, that are receiving the information, then it travels down through the axon, and then at the end it has the synaptic ending. So this is one of the synaptic endings that is communicating to a dendrite of another neuron. And so what is happening here, this right here is all the neurotransmitters that are being released onto the next neuron, and the dendrite of the other neuron is receiving it. It's understanding the information that is being sent, and again the process goes all the way down, right? The dendrite receives it, it brings it back to the body makes sense of it, then it releases it back to the axon, and the axon shoots it, right? And then give me a second. The process repeats over and over, okay? All right, so this is pretty much the way it happens, right? Here you have the beautiful cell sending all that information to the receiver, right? The dendrites of a receiver neuron sending all that information, and those neurotransmitters are super amazing. There's all these chemicals our brain produces, right? And we're going to touch more on what is happening. But one of the things that I wanted to mention here about the neurotransmitters is that neurotransmitters are pretty much when we use a drug, right? I'm not sure, let's say an addiction, because I'm going to use that as an example because of my my history with drug abuse, right? Or substance abuse. But my drug of choice used to be meth. And what it did to my brain is that the drug itself doesn't actually give you the high, right? What it does is that the high that I felt, or the high that somebody with an addiction feels, is the one that your brain releases. So if, for instance, the methamphetamine comes and does something to this neuron right here that is releasing a lot of dopamine. Do you remember that I said earlier, there are the glial cells that are controlling how much or how little of the activity is happening in the brain, right? So there is something inside the brain in here that I think I have another picture of, or I might have it over here, but let me just explain it so I know exactly. In here, this is perfect. So what happens when meth comes into your system, right, is that it really attacks this place right here, which is the neurotransmitter or the synapse. This little, I forgot the canals in here, what they're called, but they're these blue things. So what happens is that let's say that there's some messengers in here, right? What drug does to our body is that it pretty much like numbs or puts the guards in here to sleep. So all these neurotransmitters end up being released into what? Into the next cell, right? And so when there's too much of that dopamine release, or when there is too much of the norepinephrine release, or when there's too much of that serotonin release, right? What happens to your body? Your body feels like in this amazing state. Why? Because there are guards in here that say, hey, you're releasing too many neurotransmitters. We don't need that much to get that spider off your arm, right? Well, when the guards here, the blue things in here are asleep, then the neuron doesn't know how much neurotransmitters to release. Therefore, it releases all of them, right? And if the guards in here are not telling the neuron, hey, you're releasing too many, what does the neuron continue to do? They continue to just release and release and release, right? So then what happens to the other cells? They receive a lot of neurotransmitters, right? And they release it onto the bloodstream, and suddenly you're feeling really good. Why are you feeling really good? Because of all that dopamine release, right? But it happens in other things when you think about it, not just drugs, right? It can happen in sex, it can happen in shopping, it can happen in anything that causes you that addiction. It even happens in a more positive way. It happens when you're working out and you're releasing all those endorphins, right? It allows you to feel good, right? Again, it's this is how it's like a habit forming, but there's a way that you can control that, which I'm going to touch in a little bit in a few more slides. So far, am I making any sense, Carla? Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I feel like I'm going too fast, and sometimes I feel like I'm like, am I making any sense?
No, I have you on a Bluetooth speaker so I can hear you fully underneath the garage, so you can't hear me reply from where it is. But
Oh.
it is perfect, and I'm following you correctly. Everything is good.
Oh my gosh. Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to talk now about the neurotransmitters, okay? So you already saw this video right here. So the neurotransmitters, let me make sure that I don't go over my time. Excuse me. So the acetylcholine, this one is involved in various functions, including muscle movement, right? Learning, memory, and attention. It is found in neuromuscular junctions where it transmits signals from motor neurons to muscles, okay? So this is what is pretty much released when you are working out. So when you are lifting the heavy weight, right, part of your brain tells you, don't do it, it's way too heavy. And then your brain says, and then there's a message that shoots back, it's not dangerous, it's only a weight. And then your brain tells the neurons, okay, so release a little bit more of that acetylcholine so that you can be stronger and you can lift that dumbbell, okay? Now the dopamine, which is the one that pretty much makes you addicted to a lot of things, okay, plays a role in reward and motivation, movement control, and the brain's pleasure centers. This is why addiction, right, is a dopamine release, is a dopamine high. What you feel when you get high is a dopamine release when you go gamble and you suddenly hit the machine, right? Why? Because you are pretty much exciting their reward system, right? You're motivating yourself to win more money. You're motivating yourself to drink more, because when you drink more, you feel more confident or whatever it is, right? You start doing drugs. Why? Because then it doesn't make you feel whatever it doesn't make you feel, or it makes you feel more of whatever you're trying to find, right? So this is pretty much, the dopamine is a reinforcer on whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, like mood wise. Now the serotonin is, and let me tell you that also, like every neurotransmitter has the positive and the negative effect, right? Because you can also be super, like you can get a dopamine release when you see somebody that you haven't seen in a very long time, right? So you also get a dopamine release. So it could also be positive. The serotonin, it could also be positive. It could be negative, because too much serotonin makes you feel super happy and relaxed and you're like, yay, right? But a little bit of serotonin, like when you have depression, that means because you are lacking those releases, right? Or perhaps your neurons are not creating enough, they're not secreting enough serotonin. This is when you start to feel a little bit blue, okay? It's also a mood regulator. And the noradrenaline, or the norepinephrine, and this is a very hard word for me to say. So norepinephrine is involved in arousal, alertness, attention, and stress response. So when you see that the spider on your arm, the brain tells your whole body, tells your brain, oh my gosh, release norepinephrine because there is a spider on my arm. And then you're suddenly, right, like super excited. But also when you see a bear, what? It gives you that rush for you to run, right? It also gives you the condition of depression, right? Hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. So those were just a few examples of some of the most common neurotransmitters that allow you to survive, that allow you to be who you are, but also they pretty much program your brain into becoming who you are, right? We got to think all of those beautiful chemicals our brain produces to really like get to where you are, right? Whether you are going through addiction, you went out of addiction, you're heading to one, somebody, like I hope that this gives you a little bit of an understanding that when we say, well, you have the willpower, a lot of the times it's more than just willpower. It's an actual dysfunction in the brain's chemistry, in the brain's anatomy, in the brain's forming, if you may. And so obviously you can do more of your own research. You can take a screenshot of this. This is where I got all of this information, right? But there are other websites that you can research. All this are just like pinpoints that you can study on your own, that you can be curious about, so you understand your brain. I think that when you understand your brain better and how you understand the structure, not only does it allow you to understand who you are, right? But it allows you to understand who people around you are, why they act the way they act, why suddenly, we were talking earlier about homelessness off the camera, and we get to understand more of the addiction, the disease, right? That is happening to these people's minds, right? That is actually happening in people's brains. Because remember that mindset is one thing, brain is another, right? But going back to the example that I said earlier about a building, right? You have the building, AT&T building, and the building, if it's not structured well for the people to work in it, it might need to do some remodeling, right? What if you need 10 departments, but you only have 5 functioning ones? What if you need 200 phones, but all you have is 2 phones available, right? Like, what can you possibly do to restructure the brain? What can you possibly do to make it more functionable so that the mindset, which is the energy that is working within, can work better and function better. Three main parts of the brain that I want to mention is the cerebrum, is the cerebellum, and is the brainstem. And the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, which pretty much takes more or uses more of the energy in the entire brain. The cerebellum, which is back here, is located under the cerebrum. Its function is to coordinate muscle movements, maintain posture and balance, and the brainstem acts as a relay center connecting the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the spinal cord, and it performs many automatic functions like your breathing, your heart, when you're coughing, if you need to cough, all those automatic responses that you don't need to think about, that you can do them even while you're sleeping, like your hair growth, your skin regeneration, and all of that is because it's all done on the brainstem. And of course, on the cerebrum, right here, we got this four beautiful sections of the brain. We got the frontal cortex, which is this red part right here. We also have the parietal lobe, which is right here, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. We also have the brainstem right here, the cerebellum. But these four sections have mini sections inside that allows different functions of our body, that each one is in charge of, like, let's say, walking, talking, learning a new language, learning how to ride a bike. These all have a place in our brain. All right, so the frontal lobe, just let's touch, which is right here, this blue part. It's in charge of your personality, your behavior, emotions, right? Your judgment, planning, problem solving, speech, the speaking and writing, which is done in the Broca's area, somewhere around here. The body movement, right? Your intelligence, concentration, self-awareness, who are you, right, in space. The parietal lobe, it interprets language, right, words. It also has the sense of touch, like your tactile information coming in from every time you touch something. It interprets signals from vision, hearing, motor, sensory, and memory. All your sensory stuff that you're receiving from the world, it gets pretty much processed in there. But it also has spatial and visual perception, right? Where are you in space? Are you floating? Are you flying? Are you walking? Like, what are you doing, right? Are you moving to the left? Are you moving to the right? Like, are you losing your balance? So all that information goes to your parietal lobe, followed by the occipital lobe, which is over here, which is like small but cute. This is what interprets sight. So when you are looking at something, the image goes straight to your occipital lobe, right? There's some cool synaptic functionings. Then your pretty much your occipital lobe is that it's what turns that image into a code that sends it to the brain to analyze it. And so pretty much all that information that you are seeing, the light and the everything that you see, right? In order for you to understand it, like the brain doesn't think in pictures, the brain thinks in codes. So this transforms all that information into codes, right? So that the brain can understand it better and understand what information you are bringing in through your eyes. And the temporal lobe, which is on the side, understanding, which understands the language, also memory. In here, the hippocampus is in here somewhere inside this wrinkly areas, the memory, the hearing, also the sequencing and organization. And you can also find all this information that I got from Mayfield Brain and Spine, but also go and do your own research, okay, to different websites, get curious, learn more about what parts of your brain, right? You understand yourself a lot better. And so I guess we are almost done. We're going to leave it here, but we're going to learn next week about the habits. So based on everything that we learned, which was a lot, we're going to talk more about the habit loop, right? What is a habit? How do we form habits? How you're able to break through those habits? And, you know, and then we're going to jump right in after into our paradigms, right? Which is the building blocks of our beings, how we are pretty much habitual beings, right? Everything we do by habit, whether intentional or unintentional. And also paradigms is touches on the neuroplasticity, right? How you can rewire your brain to break through any habit or to learn a new habit or to just become better at learning something that you always wanted to learn. Okay, so we're gonna cut it here. I hope that you enjoyed class today. If you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and send me a DM either through our private chat or through my Instagram. You can find me at Coach Carmen Cadena on my Instagram. But with that, we're gonna call it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. I know I went a little bit fast. It was just so much information. I wanted to make sure that everything was all fit into this section.
Well, once they fit that first section and you find that great stopping point, it's not a lot of information. It's just the exciting function of the fundamental laydown that we're doing, you know?
Yeah.
And then it leaves such a beautiful space of, wow, now let's look for what we're fixing to do next week with that. And it gives us a perfect stopping point to embrace and to, you know, as you said, you know, to discover. And it's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. But isn't that like so? Like I'm just so fascinated because I'm like, I get it, you know? So when
Oh,
I
I
do
do.
something, right?
I am a brain. I love it. I mean, I am like, you know, this, you're speaking my language. I geek out about it. And it's an ability, just opens my mind to unlimited possibilities and just an amazement of how God created the most amazing machine that we get to be engineers with, you know?
Right? Right?
Then we get to go, not just the brain, but wait, let's see. He's in my favorite, one of the scriptures reads, by the power of your what?
Mind?
And the tongue, life,
Right.
life and death. Wait, and by your word, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like, yes, look at this thing that we get to live. Yeah. So,
Right? Yeah. I love that. I love that what you said. Thank you.
yeah.
So I'm
And
glad that you liked it.
yes, thank you for your time. I can only sow in the seed of appreciation, thank you, and gratitude. And you have enlarged my heart and my mind, and I value all that I learned from you today.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much, Carla. I hope that you find it useful. Okay.
And I'm be praying you feel better, okay?
Thank you. Yes. That's why I was like, oh my God, hurry, 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 hurry. Because I know once I stop, then my cough is like, you use me so much. You know, my voice. But okay, well, thank you so much. See you next week, okay?
See you
Okay,
soon. Go
have an amazing rest of your week. Bye, Carla. Take care.
forward. Ciao.
Bye. Bye.